Okay, good morning, folks. Today we're going to do a simple somatic practice for grief, for addressing grief. Um, Folks who've worked with me for a while know that my starting point for nearly almost anything is the body. And, it's kind of becoming a trendy word, somatics, somatic or somatics. It's kind of yeah, we're getting a little more ubiquitous right now, but it's just a fancy way of saying pertaining to the body or the soma. And so when it comes to grief or most other things, that's usually my starting point, mostly because that's the one of the parts of us that has been really ignored or kind of segmented in the particularly dominant Western culture. But really that primary somatic experience is how we would have interacted with the world prior to the cultural shifts that began preferencing thought and abstraction. So we're going to go back to the body. The invitation, as always, is to just sort of receive the instruction in a really open-handed way, like take what feels useful to you, try it on. If it feels like there's an opening for that, add your own version, iteration as it feels appropriate or useful in your own context. Yeah, and I'll just add one last piece around, like, when it comes to grief in particular, I do think there's totally a place for conversation and thought and storytelling about our experiences to help contextualize and bring language to them. And my experience has been at some point, there's a limit to what words and talking and storytelling can do. And sometimes even sort of keeps us in a loop or a spiral of that emotional swirl that doesn't really allow the energy to kind of complete its cycle. So by incorporating the body and some of these somatic practices, the intention is to just let the energy move, even if we already fully understand or have the language, or even if there's no language to describe what we're experiencing. Cool, and welcome to folks joining. If you'd like to put your name in the chat and just say where you're watching from, you're welcome to do that. And I'll have a few prompts along the way to share what you're tracking as well, if you want to share that at any point. No pressure. So to begin, I'll invite you actually to look away from the screen and just kind of let your eyes wander. This will be a short, simple practice. So we'll do a very simple warm-up of just letting eyes wander, letting your senses kind of soften and widen. You can imagine, I often imagine my ears as like little fox ears getting wide and swiveling and listening. You can relax through the back of your body, almost like you're resting back, kind of letting your attention rest back. And I often start to just let little wiggles or movements happen in their own way. There's no real prescription for this, but just kind of lubricating the mobile parts of your soma, your body, and feeling for, part of this is diagnostic, is just kind of feeling for where there is sensation, where there is fluidness, where there is stuckness, where there's numbness, no sensation, just kind of a light scan. And letting your outer sensing start to kind of move inward to scan through your sort of inner ecology, even starting with your skin and settling more inward. But yay! Hi, Rue. Good to see you. Calling from the Dark Island, Kalahus territory, so-called Cortez Island. Cool. Thanks for joining. Yeah, so this first part, sometimes we call it orientation, where you're just sort of tuning into the specific sensory cues of being right here, right now. So I'll often even also take my hands and, feel the ground or feel the walls around me, just really letting my body arrive right here and right now, this physical space. You'll often hear me invite your noticing towards something that's beautiful or bright, something that gives you a little sense of pleasure in the space. That can be its own skill of orienting towards pleasurable sensation. And letting your soma, letting your body respond with whatever little movements, like little calibrations to that noticing. Okay, and then I'll invite you to take hands and rub them together, and we'll use the hands as kind of a bridge between the external and internal world. So you can rub your hands to make them a little warm, and then just take your hands gently on your body, on your skin, kind of wherever it feels feels just right. You can place hands at your legs. It can be a kind of more vigorous brushing kind of movement, or a slower, heavier massage like movement. Or it can just be placing hands firmly or gently wherever it feels just right. You don't have to know where or why you're kind of feeling called to place your hands wherever they're going. You're just kind of familiarizing yourself with that perimeter of your soma. Kind of welcoming yourself home, welcoming yourself here. Sometimes I'll even imagine sort of beckoning, calling back all of the things that have been maybe scattered or hiding or even exiled. And grief can often be one of those that hides or has been sort of pushed to the edges. So just taking hands over the body as a way of kind of welcoming and drawing back in all the scattered parts. Okay, and then the next phase I'll invite as just a really gentle stimulus through the system, through humming. We'll do a couple of rounds of just not elaborate, just a gentle hum. And the invitation is to source that sound as low as possible as you can. And I kind of think about this sometimes as like sending out a little echolocation ping. We're sending that little bit of stimulus through the system as just like a brightening or a waking up or a saying hello to the system. So you're welcome to just listen if you'd like, or you can join in, starting with an exhalation and inhalation. And I like to keep my mouth closed, at least to start, because it keeps that reverberation inside for a little bit longer. I wasn't really planning this, but you'll notice there's just some movement that feels like it kind of goes with that sound and is, yeah, feeling right for me. So you can try that on if that feels good for you. Okay. And just as a way of kind of riding that wave, we'll do one last hum. And as this one is closing, I'll invite an opening of the mouth and imagining kind of that wave cresting and then falling and settling so that the system can kind of come to some kind of place of, it doesn't have to be complete stillness, but a little bit of settling. Yeah, so just allowing a little bit of quiet, a little bit of slowness or even stillness to arrive here. Doesn't have to be complete stillness. You can keep a little pulsation or little sighs or sounds if that feels good. And those pieces were really about just kind of priming your system to allow for a little more movement, a little more flow, a little more riding of waves of sensation, emotion, encounter of any kind. And now we'll just invite a little bit of settling, maybe feeling the earth beneath the body, the fingertips on the ground, maybe imagining a root that drops from the belly all the way deep down into the earth, or whatever helps you to feel connected and in relationship to our sweet Mother Earth, our sweet parent here. Oh, okay. And yeah, this wasn't actually the plan, but I'm kind of listening right now. Though it feels right is to first just offer some gratitude to the land, to the ancestors of these lands, to the earth that is the body that we are, a little cell, a little organ connected to, and for the earth of our bodies that are a sweet little microcosm of our bigger, beautiful earth. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to the whole web of life holding us. And with those offerings, perhaps we can just listen to what that little bit of offering or opening of the hands and opening of the awareness into the wider web, what that might give back to us in this time. It doesn't have to be an answer right now. So now, without thinking too hard, I'll invite each of us to just hold this open question: where does grief live in my body? And it doesn't have to come right now in this moment with a feeling of sadness or anything like that. It might not be that accessible in this moment. But just notice what your awareness shows you, what your inner wisdom points to. What's the first place that comes to mind in your soma or that lights up in your awareness? Where does grief live? And without thinking too hard and without needing to fix it or change it, I'll just invite us to dwell, to abide there in that place in the body for a breath or two. If it feels nourishing, you can even kind of place your hands there. For some reason right now, I'm feeling it kind of in my lower, what is this side? My lower right, like mid back area. And let's just take a moment to say hello there. Say hello, and here we are. You don't have to fix or change, but notice if there's a way to just breathe a little space around it or acknowledge this place in the soma. And any part of the sensory cues, the physical cues that sort of indicate that. What is the sensation of grief in your body? Is it heavy or light? Is it cool or cold or warm or hot? Is it tingling or tight or spacious? And again, I'll just reiterate, it doesn't in this moment have to come with the emotion of grief, right? You're asking intuitively, you're sensing intuitively. So if there's anything you're noticing in that you want to kind of pin for your own awareness, or that you'd like to share it with us, I'll invite you to answer those questions in the chat. Where does grief live in your body? And what is the sensation? What are the sensations that you're noticing connected to that place, to grief, that grief place in your body? My nephew's here right now, so if you can hear his high little voice in the other room, that's what's going on. Which is great. Just a sign of life among us. So we'll just kind of flag that noticing, and then let's take another breath and like another little wiggle. Because I want to offer one more question to gather some information here. Yeah. So grief in lower back, belly, and lungs. Yeah. Thanks for that share. And I'm curious if there's any more specific sensation you're aware of connected to those places in your lower back, belly, and lungs. So if you want to share that, happy to hear that. So now go ahead and, without thinking too hard, see if you can kind of widen your noticing, like send out your awareness into the wider web. And let's ask again, we did this a couple weeks ago, but we'll just ask again, where does grief live in the wider ecology? Where in the body of the land is grief living or hiding, or has been tucked away to? And it doesn't have to make sense in any cognitive way. That might show up as a natural element, a tree or a stone. It might show up as an energy or a color or a being. It might show up just in this directional felt sense. So as if you were kind of tuning into that wider body ecology. Where is it? And is there any relationship between grief that you're feeling in your own body, in your own soma, and how it's showing up in the wider system. So just kind of lightly, don't have to think too hard about it, just kind of observing, toggling inward, outward. Yeah. So the heavy, watery heaviness, ache, bloatedness, and a kind of tightness in the bloatedness. Yeah, those are really great sensory descriptions. Thanks for that. Yeah. Mhm. So as we're tuning into that kind of wider ecology, you're just starting to kind of open that awareness to the wider ecology. Again, doesn't have to make sense, and we don't have to fix or change it. Just observing, witnessing. And the invitation is to continue to track. Is there any sensation here that you become aware of in your physical soma, as your physical body, as you're tuning into that wider ecology? Where is grief in the wider ecology, and what does that feel like in your body? So anything from that you want to share in the chat to track for your own self or to track together, you can drop that in as well. We'll just take about another 2 breaths here. And then we'll just take a long exhalation. And just kind of traveling the arc of the practice. So we had some encounter, some offering, some encounter, and now kind of moving towards settling, to moving through. Just to invite you, any of those opening kind of warm-ups that we did, that humming or shaking or touch or wiggling, that feel like a just right way to sort of move through any of those energies that you touched in on. And what do I want to say about this? Yeah, it's kind of this question of like, where is there stuck energy that wants to move? I guess that's maybe the simplest way. And you don't have to think too hard about it. So just letting whatever kind of movement or gesture or sound that wants to happen just from those brief encounters, letting that happen in its own way. And this is where you can kind of let the animalness of your body or the childness of your body do its thing. And it's actually kind of handy that we're, like doing this in this way, because we can have a lot of kind of social inhibitions if we think people are watching. I mean, you're watching me, I'm not watching you. So you can really do whatever feels just right. So that whatever you touched in on, it doesn't have to stay stuck. You can just go back where it wants to settle, move through. What's the just right gesture here to let that little bit of grief that we touched in on move through? Sometimes we feel it as we move through, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it just shifts in its own way without us having to over process or over analyze or over story tell about it. Okay. I'm feeling, actually quite a bit of heat coming off of my body. And when that feels complete, we'll just do maybe a couple of long exhalations to let even that little bit of metabolization settle. Maybe I'm feeling a movement towards even a little more stillness here. Just feeling my tailbone on the ground, letting gravity hug my body downward. It's kind of laying that compost layer on the ground, under the ground. Oh. And if emotion does come through, can you let it move through without assigning a story or meaning making to it? Can it just be energy that's trying to find its way back home? That's trying to get unstuck. Okay. So we'll come to close. Invite you to open your eyes really gently, maybe blinking them a few times if they were closed, and just looking around your room, looking around the ecosystem you're in, maybe touching the wall or the floor, or letting your eyes settle somewhere beautiful or bright. I'm seeing the blue sky outside and a tree, and the wind moving in a tree. And just inviting yourself to arrive back right here, right now. Okay. And just as a final sort of landmark noticing, I'll invite you to find one place in your body soma system that feels at least neutral or maybe even pleasant. Is there somewhere you can identify in your physical body? It might be your outer senses, something you can see or smell or touch. It might be your inner sensing, a place of warmth or heaviness or lightness that feels good, kind of good. Or less bad. Sometimes it's just relative. And if you want to name where you're landing, where you're kind of standing in our closing part, even if you're having to effort a little bit to locate that, to land there, I'll invite you to drop that in the chat as our last little kind of X on the map. So that is our practice for today. That is a simple somatic practice to encounter grief and start a little bit of moving through, allowing the movement of grief in our soma and the wider soma. So if this sparked or settled something for you, I want to invite you and encourage you to join our community grief ritual practice. It's happening on October 15th. It's called Making Room for What Is, a communal practice of grief and gladness. I'll put the link in the chat. It's a sliding scale offering. No one turned away for lack of funds, and I would love for you to join. And if you know of anyone who could use a space like what we just briefly practiced or what I'm describing, please share this offering with them. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and at least my opinion, my premise is that there continues to be a backlog of unmetabolized many things, but grief is one of them. So if we can make some spaces for that, it really does support the resiliency of the whole system. If you could use extra one-on-one focus, more one-on-one support, I do have a few one-on-one openings for clients this fall, either for psychic readings or somatic work. I call the somatic work sacred body listening. And I can put my booking link in the chat as well. I have, a limited space for that, but I would love to support folks one-on-one if you feel the need for that. Okay, yeah, thanks, Rue. Thanks for joining, everyone. And we'll have, I think, 2 more weeks of grief focused calls. So next Friday and the following Friday. So happy to have you tune back in then. And please let me know in the chat what you're taking away from this practice, and anything else that you noticed. I'd love to hear about that, your experiences. And yeah, thanks so much for your participation and for sharing your experiences there. Really good to practice with you. Okay, take care, y'all.